Imagine a world where goodness is not a virtue, but a liability. A world where the more kind you are, the more vulnerable you become. A world where the people who smile at you are not your allies, but your competitors sharpening their knives behind their backs. Now stop imagining. It's the world we live in. And the sooner you understand that, the sooner you can stop being a pawn. Because this isn't a story about morality. It's a story about power. And Machiavelli, the man whose name became synonymous with manipulation and ruthless pragmatism, understood something most people still deny. That goodness, when left unchecked, can be your greatest weakness.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
We've all been told that goodness is the goal. Be honest. Be kind. Be humble. But what happens when that goodness is exploited? What happens when your kindness is seen not as strength, but as softness? Machiavelli didn't hate goodness. He feared its illusion. He saw what happens when a ruler, or even an ordinary person, believes that being good is enough. The world doesn't reward purity. It rewards results. And sometimes, those results require decisions that goodness cannot make. Let's cut deeper. Why do we cling to goodness so tightly? Because it gives us identity. It gives us safety. It gives us the illusion that if we are good, we will be protected. But that's the trap. The world does not operate on fairness. It operates on force, leverage, perception. And if you think your goodness will shield you from betrayal, loss, or chaos, you are writing a fantasy script for a brutal reality. Machiavelli's genius wasn't in promoting evil. It was in exposing the myth that good always wins. Ask yourself this: when was the last time your goodness cost you something? The time you forgave someone who didn't deserve it. The time you said yes when you should have said no. The time you stayed quiet to keep the peace when your truth was burning inside you. That wasn't weakness. It was conditioning. We were raised in a system that rewards obedience, not power. We were taught to be good, not strategic. And somewhere along the way, we confused being nice with being noble. Here's the reality Machiavelli forces us to face. People are not always what they seem. They don't always act from reason. They act from fear, desire, ego, survival. And in that chaotic mix, goodness is not a universal language. It's a dialect only a few speak, and even fewer respect. If you walk into a room full of predators speaking the language of prey, what do you think happens next? You get eaten. Not because you're wrong, but because you're naive. Machiavelli's most controversial claim was this: it is better to be feared than loved. But he didn't mean fear as cruelty. He meant respect, boundaries, control. If people fear the consequences of crossing you, they think twice. If they only love you, they will test you. Love is soft. It's fickle. Fear, when used wisely, creates space for respect. And respect is the real currency of power. So, what does this mean for us? It means we need to redefine goodness. Not as blind compassion, but as strategic morality. Doing what is right, yes, but doing it in a way that protects your power. You can be good and still say no. You can be good and still walk away. You can be good and still hold the line. Machiavelli would say goodness without strength is useless. It's a candle in a hurricane. Let's go deeper into the psyche. Why do we love heroes who suffer for goodness? Because we are addicted to sacrifice. We think pain equals virtue, that the more we lose for others, the more noble we become. But that narrative was designed to keep you small, to keep you giving while others take, to keep you noble while others rule. Machiavelli flips that script. He asks, what is the point of goodness if it leads you to powerlessness? Now pause. Think about your life. How many times have you been punished for your goodness? How many times have you helped someone who later abandoned you? How many times have you told the truth and paid the price while liars got ahead? It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to wake up, because the world is not going to reward you for being good. It will use you until you stop letting it. This is not a call to become evil. It's a call to become aware, to stop walking through life like a lamb expecting lions to play fair. Machiavelli doesn't ask you to betray your soul. He asks you to protect it, to understand that the battlefield of life requires more than ideals. It requires tactics. It requires timing. It requires the ability to wield power without being consumed by it. Let's explore a Machiavellian principle that most people misunderstand. Appearances matter more than reality. That sounds shallow until you realize how true it is. People judge you not by who you are, but by who you appear to be. You can be wise, but if you look unsure, they will doubt you. You can be strong, but if you seem uncertain, they will test you. The world takes cues from what you project, not what you intend. So why do good people often fail? Because they believe intentions are enough. They think people will feel their sincerity, their heart, their truth. But people don't feel what you feel. They see what you show. And if you don't learn to project power, you will be misunderstood, underestimated, or worse, manipulated. Machiavelli teaches us to control the script, to master perception, to craft the mask that protects the face. This isn't about deception, it's about strategy. You don't lie to hurt people. You shape perception to survive in a world that punishes rawness. You learn that being completely transparent is not virtuous, it's dangerous. You learn to read the room. You learn when to speak and when to stay silent, when to show strength and when to let them think you're weak. Because sometimes looking weak is how you draw your enemies out. There's a hidden power in restraint that goodness often forgets. Goodness rushes to fix, to please, to prove. But power waits. Power watches. Power lets others reveal themselves. Machiavelli would tell you, don't be the loudest. Be the most calculated. Let others waste their energy explaining. You observe. You listen. You wait until the moment they think they've won. Then you move. This is where the dark truth about goodness becomes clear. We think goodness is enough. That if we are kind, truthful, generous, life will reward us. But history tells a different story. The kind were crucified. The truthful were exiled. The gentle were broken, unless they also had power. Moral without might is martyrdom. And Machiavelli's wisdom is the medicine to that naive idealism. bitter, but necessary. Now ask yourself the deepest question yet. Are you living by your values or by your fears? Are you being good because it's who you are, or because you're afraid of what will happen if you're not? If your goodness is born from fear, it's not goodness. It's self-protection. And self-protection without awareness turns into self-destruction. You become the person who gives everything and wonders why they're empty. Machiavelli's truth is dark because it shines a light where most people don't want to look. Into the parts of us that doubt, that rage, that dream of power, but feel guilty for wanting it. But those parts are not evil. They are human. And if you ignore them, they don't disappear. They rot. They turn into resentment, bitterness, passive aggression. But if you integrate them, if you bring your darkness into the light, you become whole. Wholeness is the antidote to the good versus evil mindset. You are not meant to be pure. You are meant to be real. And real people know when to be soft and when to be sharp, when to forgive and when to walk away, when to be loved and when to be feared. That's the balance Machiavelli offers. Not cruelty, not kindness, but clarity. The clarity to see the world not as we wish it to be, but as it is. And then to move through it not with cynicism, but with vision, strength, and a mind that cannot be manipulated. To truly understand Machiavelli, we must first understand what he was reacting to. He lived during a time of betrayal, shifting alliances, and brutal power plays in Renaissance Italy. Princes were overthrown overnight. Empires collapsed because of naive trust. Leaders were assassinated because they mistook flattery for loyalty. He saw the cost of goodness firsthand, not in theory, but in blood. And so when he wrote The Prince, he wasn't writing a guide for monsters. He was writing a survival manual for anyone who wanted to keep their soul intact in a world that doesn't play fair. And here is where we must confront the illusion that most of us were raised to believe, that goodness is safe. That if we just stay kind, peaceful, and honest, people will treat us the same. But look around. How many people have been destroyed for telling the truth? How many have been used for their kindness, stepped on because they refused to fight back? The world respects power, not purity. It listens to those who command attention, not those who quietly hope to be heard. And this isn't cynicism. It's realism. Machiavelli is saying, stop hoping for a just world. Start preparing for a real one. Now let's go even deeper. What is goodness really? Most of us think of it as moral behavior, helping others, being honest, following the rules. But Machiavelli saw that goodness is not always what it seems. Sometimes people act good to manipulate, to gain trust, to build an image. And if you mistake performance for principle, you will be fooled over and over again. That's why he says it's better to appear good than to be good, because appearances control perception, and perception controls power. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Some of the most dangerous people in the world wear the mask of goodness. They use it to disarm you, to lower your guard, to infiltrate your trust. They don't need to threaten you. They just smile, flatter, and wait. And by the time you realize their intentions, it's too late. That is the Machiavellian warning. Not that we should become manipulators, but that we must learn to recognize them. Because failing to understand the psychology of power is the fastest way to lose it. So how do we use this insight? First, we must stop seeing morality as a fixed identity. You are not a good person or a bad person. You are a human being with a range of choices. And sometimes, doing what is right requires doing what is hard. Sometimes, protecting your peace means saying no, walking away, or even confronting someone directly. Machiavelli would say, "Don't confuse being nice with being noble." True nobility is choosing what's right not just for others, but for yourself. This leads us into the most radical part of Machiavelli's philosophy, the idea that sometimes, to preserve good, you must do what appears to be evil. This is what he meant when he said a leader must be willing to act immorally when necessary. He wasn't promoting cruelty, he was acknowledging trade-offs. If a lie prevents a war, is it evil? If a harsh law prevents chaos, is it wrong? If you must break a promise to protect your people, are you weak or are you wise? These are the kinds of moral conflicts that most people avoid. But Machiavelli forces us to face them. And this is where emotional maturity comes in. Because most of us want clean answers. We want black and white, hero or villain. But real life is not a fairy tale. Sometimes the hero has to make brutal choices. Sometimes the villain started with good intentions. And if you only ever think in absolutes, you will never understand power. You will either be ruled by it or corrupted by it. Only those who can hold complexity can navigate leadership without becoming lost. Ask yourself this: have you ever made a decision that felt wrong in the moment, but protected you in the long run? Have you ever walked away from someone who needed help because you knew it would destroy you to stay? Have you ever told a lie to prevent a greater harm? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary if we want to mature beyond virtue signaling into authentic strength. Because sometimes the most moral act is the one that costs you your image of being a good person. Now let's talk about power, not just political or financial, but personal power. The power to say no. The power to walk away. The power to not explain yourself to people who won't understand. Goodness without power gets exploited, but power without goodness becomes tyranny. Machiavelli's brilliance was that he didn't choose one over the other. He showed how to balance both, to be strategic without being soulless, to be good but not gullible. That balance requires self-awareness. You must know your own darkness. You must know what you're capable of. Because if you don't, someone else will find it for you and use it against you. The shadow you deny becomes the weakness they exploit. Machiavelli would say, don't pretend to be harmless. Be dangerous, but disciplined. Be capable of destruction, but choose restraint. That is real goodness. Not the absence of power, but the control of it. And now we arrive at a deeper layer, legacy. What do you want to be remembered for? Not just how you made people feel, but what you built, what you protected, what you stood for when it wasn't easy. Machiavelli believed that history remembers those who act, not those who hesitate. But action without principle is chaos, and principle without action is fantasy. So the question becomes, can you be both ruthless and righteous? Can you be feared and loved? Can you be good and still protect yourself? These are not easy questions, but they are the questions of leaders, of creators, of anyone who wants to shape their life instead of being shaped by it. You were not born just to please people. You were born to build something, to stand for something, to know who you are, even when the world tries to confuse you. And that clarity of identity, of mission, of boundaries, that is your power. Machiavelli would tell you this: don't be afraid of being strategic. Don't be ashamed of thinking 2 steps ahead. Don't apologize for protecting your energy, your time, or your truth. The people who try to shame you for being too much are often the ones who benefit from you being less. And your job is not to shrink for their comfort. It's to rise for your purpose. Let's revisit the idea of image, because in today's world, image is everything. Social media has turned perception into reality, and most people are performing goodness, not practicing it. They curate kindness online while hiding resentment offline. They speak of love but act from fear. Machiavelli would challenge you: don't just look good, be good. And then learn how to make it visible. Because if you are powerful in secret but appear weak in public, you will still be treated as weak. The key is alignment. Your inner strength must match your outer presence. Your words must carry weight, because they come from grounded truth. Your silence must be powerful, not passive. Your kindness must be chosen, not automatic. That is the kind of goodness that cannot be manipulated. That is the kind of person who walks into a room and changes the temperature, not by shouting, but by simply existing with presence. And presence is everything. In a world addicted to speed, presence is power. When you slow down, when you speak with intention, when you look someone in the eye and mean what you say, you become unforgettable. Not because you're perfect, not because you're loud, but because you are real, you are rare. You are someone who has integrated the light and the shadow. And that kind of person is not just respected, they're followed. There is something terrifying about genuine self-awareness. The moment you realize that your goodness, though sincere, may have been used as a shield to avoid confrontation. The moment you admit that the kindness you've always led with may have been, at times, a strategy to be liked, or worse, a survival tactic. These aren't judgments, they're revelations. Because in Machiavelli's world, and in ours, the greatest danger is pretending you're not playing the game while everyone else is playing to win. And the first step to reclaiming your power is to admit, whether you like it or not, you're on the board. We often think of manipulation as inherently evil, but that's a surface-level interpretation. Manipulation is simply influence without transparency. And while Machiavelli doesn't advocate for deceit as a lifestyle, he does make one thing clear: if you leave your influence to chance, you lose it. You must learn how to shape perception, not because you want to deceive, but because perception shapes outcomes. If someone misunderstands your strength as weakness, they won't hesitate to test you. If they mistake your silence for ignorance, they'll try to speak over you. This is not about ego. It's about survival. Ask yourself right now, how often do you suppress your truth to protect someone else's comfort? How many times have you swallowed your instincts because you feared being too much, too cold, or too intense? These are the questions that expose the real cost of unchecked goodness. Because when we refuse to set boundaries, we don't earn respect, we invite confusion. And in a confused world, clarity is power. Machiavelli's brilliance lies in giving us permission to stop apologizing for being strategic about it. Let's go even further. The people we admire most, leaders, artists, visionaries, they're rarely nice in the traditional sense. They are bold, intentional, sometimes polarizing, but they are clear. They know who they are and what they stand for. Even when they're generous, it's not out of guilt, it's because they've chosen to be. And that's the difference. When your goodness is a choice, not a compulsion, it becomes a strength. When you give because you want to, not because you're afraid not to, you reclaim your agency. Machiavelli would tell you, stop seeking approval. Approval is the currency of the powerless. Influence is the currency of the aware. When you move from needing to be liked to needing to be understood, your entire posture changes. You no longer walk into rooms hoping to be accepted. You walk in with presence, asking nothing, offering everything, on your own terms. And that shift is not just psychological. It's magnetic. People sense it. They may not agree with you, but they'll respect you. Now let's talk about fear. Because this is the emotion most people avoid, but Machiavelli faced head-on. He didn't glorify fear, but he understood its utility. In his view, a leader who is feared but not hated can maintain order far more effectively than one who is loved but not respected. That's not just about politics, it's about life. If people fear the consequences of disrespecting your boundaries, they will think twice. But if they only love your kindness, they may take advantage of it. Love without limits breeds entitlement. Fear without cruelty breeds respect. So how do you apply this? Start by becoming a mirror. Reflect the energy you're given. If someone approaches you with respect, meet them with warmth. If they push your boundaries, respond with calm firmness, not anger, not revenge, just clarity. You don't need to yell to be powerful. You just need to mean what you say. Say less, but make it count. Don't react, respond. Don't try to be liked, try to be respected. Because respect, once earned, opens the door to authentic connection. This is where we break free from the lie that goodness means self-sacrifice. It doesn't. True goodness includes self-respect. It includes discipline. It includes saying no. It includes walking away from people who treat your empathy like a resource to be mined. When you practice goodness from a place of wholeness, not woundedness, you become untouchable, not arrogant, not cold, but sovereign. You become the kind of person who gives without losing, who helps without being drained, who loves without being owned. Machiavelli's philosophy doesn't ask you to become cold-blooded. It asks you to become clear-minded. It asks you to stop hoping people will treat you well and start ensuring it. To stop expecting fairness and start building leverage. To stop relying on moral superiority and start mastering psychological sovereignty. That doesn't mean abandoning your values. It means learning how to protect them in a world that often punishes them. And this, more than anything, is what separates the powerful from the powerless, the ability to live in reality without losing your soul. The weak wait for the world to change. The wise adapt to what is and change themselves accordingly. Machiavelli didn't want you to become a villain. He wanted you to stop being a victim. He wanted you to stop idolizing goodness and start embodying wisdom. Because when wisdom guides your goodness, you become unstoppable. There's a story that plays over and over again in history. The noble thinker who is silenced, the kind-hearted leader who is betrayed, the honest revolutionary who is exiled, and we mourn them. We call them martyrs. But what if they had been just a little more strategic? What if they had known how to protect their message without sacrificing their lives? What if they had studied the enemy, not just preached against them? That is the Machiavellian question. Not how do I win at all costs, but how do I preserve what matters most, even when the world is hostile to it? So now we arrive at the final moment in this journey. You've seen both sides. You felt the weight of goodness. You've understood the danger of naivety. Now the question is, what will you do with that knowledge? Will you return to the old ways, trying to please, trying to prove, trying to protect everyone but yourself? Or will you evolve? Evolving doesn't mean abandoning compassion. It means upgrading it. It means seeing the world as it is and choosing to act with both heart and spine. It means being the kind of person who can lead, protect, and build without being broken by the pressure to be perfect. Because perfection is a trap. Strategy is freedom. So take this moment and ask yourself, perhaps the most difficult question of all, have I been good, or have I just been afraid of being anything else? And if the answer shakes you, that's good. That's where your power begins, in the honest acknowledgement that you can be more than just good. You can be good and cunning, good and commanding, good and dangerous to anything that tries to shrink you. That is the Machiavellian paradox, that in order to preserve the light, you must sometimes walk through the dark. That to protect what's noble, you must be willing to do what's necessary. That to lead with love, you must also lead with strength. Not because you've lost your soul, but because you finally claimed it. And when you do, when you become the kind of person who is both kind and clear, generous and grounded, good and unshakable, you won't need to chase power. You will become it, and the world will notice. Not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it, quietly, strategically, unapologetically. Now go take your throne, not in someone else's kingdom, but in your own mind. That is where the revolution begins. That is where real goodness lives. Not in weakness, but in wisdom. Not in passivity, but in power. Not in illusion, but in truth. The dark truth about goodness is that it shines brightest when it's no longer afraid of the dark.